Have you ever wondered why certain emotional wounds seem to carve themselves deep into both mind and flesh, leaving scars that ache long after the trauma itself? Or why, for some, the urge to numb that pain becomes so overpowering that it's almost impossible to resist? Every day, millions struggle with this invisible war, caught in the crossfire between traumatic memories and the desperate escape offered by addiction. The statistics are startling. People living with PTSD are far more likely to develop substance abuse disorders than the general population. Yet behind every number is a very human story of survival, pain, and the uphill fight for healing. This article delves into the dangerous cycle that links trauma, addiction, and physical decline, exploring not just how these forces reinforce each other, but also why breaking free is so notoriously difficult. Along the way, we'll uncover what science now knows about these intertwined battles and what might offer hope for those trying to reclaim their lives. To understand this vicious cycle, we first have to look at what PTSD truly is, not just as a medical term, but as a living experience. Post-traumatic stress disorder is more than flashbacks and nightmares. It's the body's alarm system jammed on high, keeping people trapped in a constant state of alert. Everyday sounds might trigger a surge of adrenaline, while memories they'd do anything to forget suddenly hijack their mind. Scientists have discovered that trauma can actually reshape the brain, rewiring the circuits that regulate fear, emotion, and even pleasure. Faced with this relentless inner turmoil, many reach for whatever offers relief. Sometimes it's alcohol, a temporary hush to the noise inside. For others, it's opioids, stimulants, or even behaviors like gambling, anything to escape the grip of traumatic memories. At first, these substances seem to help. They can calm nerves, dull anxiety, and give a fleeting sense of control. But this self-medication rarely leads to true peace. Instead, it plants the seeds for addiction, as the brain becomes increasingly dependent on outside chemicals to feel anything close to normal. What starts as an attempt to survive unbearable pain can quickly spiral into another prison. The substances that once soothed now bring their own punishment, withdrawal symptoms, cravings, and growing shame. Addiction takes over not just the mind, but the body itself, hijacking motivation, memory, and even basic health. The person is left fighting a two-headed beast: trauma on one side, addiction on the other, with each feeding the other's strength. This tangled relationship between PTSD and addiction is more than coincidence. It's a feedback loop that intensifies over time. For instance, repeated substance use can further disrupt the brain's delicate chemistry, weakening the very systems that should help a person recover from trauma. Chronic drinking or drug use impairs sleep, worsens mood swings, and erodes judgment, making flashbacks and intrusive thoughts even harder to manage. Meanwhile, the body pays its own price: weakened immune response, higher rates of heart disease, and an overall acceleration of physical decline. Real-world stories reveal just how relentless this cycle can be. Take, for example, the experiences of veterans returning from war. Haunted by memories of combat, many struggle with nightmares and hypervigilance. Some turn to alcohol to blunt the edges of their anxiety, only to find themselves battling a new enemy: addiction. The same pattern holds true for survivors of abuse, catastrophic accidents, or any life-altering trauma. The pain of the past doesn't fade, it mutates, manifesting as both mental anguish and physical breakdown. What makes this cycle so hard to break isn't just biology. There are powerful psychological and social forces at play. The stigma surrounding both PTSD and addiction leads many to hide their struggles, withdrawing from friends and family just when they need support most. Shame and self-blame can sap the will to seek help, reinforcing a sense of isolation. Even those who want to change often face barriers: a lack of access to effective treatment, unstable housing, or unsympathetic workplaces. Beneath it all, the brain itself has changed. Prolonged exposure to stress and substance use rewires neural pathways, making it harder to feel pleasure from everyday activities or to find motivation in positive goals. Triggers, sights, sounds, even smells can instantly pull someone back into survival mode or set off cravings long after the original trauma has passed. The result is a relentless cycle. Pain leads to substance use, which worsens physical and mental health, which in turn deepens pain. Yet, despite the complexity and relentlessness of this cycle, science has begun to unravel new paths toward healing. Researchers now know that the same brain circuits damaged by trauma and addiction can, under the right conditions, be retrained. One promising approach is trauma-focused therapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. These treatments help individuals process painful memories, gradually weakening their emotional power and breaking the automatic link between trauma and distress. Medication can play a role too, not as a cure, but as a tool. Some antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs can reduce symptoms enough for people to fully engage in therapy. In severe cases, medications to help with substance withdrawal or cravings offer a bridge to stability, but no treatment works in isolation. Recovery from this double bind is most successful when it includes social connection, support groups, understanding families, and communities that foster belonging rather than judgment. Real hope is found in the stories of those who have climbed out of the darkest places. One former addict and trauma survivor described recovery not as a straight line, but as a winding journey with setbacks and breakthroughs. The hardest part wasn't quitting drugs. It was learning to sit with myself, my memories, my fears without running away. That's when I finally started to heal. Their stories underscore a vital truth. With patience, support, and the right resources, even deeply entrenched cycles can be broken. On a larger scale, society itself must change. The stigma that surrounds both PTSD and addiction still acts as a major barrier to healing. Too often, those struggling are met with suspicion or blame rather than compassion and practical help. Public education, improved access to mental health services, and workplaces that recognize the realities of trauma and addiction can all play a role in turning the tide. In the end, the tangled web of PTSD and addiction is more than a medical problem, it's a human one, rooted in suffering but not devoid of hope. The damage may run deep, affecting mind and body in ways that are invisible to most, but the journey toward healing, while long and uneven, is possible. It demands patience, the right blend of scientific intervention and social support, and above all, a willingness to see those caught in the cycle not as failures, but as survivors. It is easy to judge from the outside, to see only the destructive behaviors or physical decline, and overlook the underlying wounds. But when we look deeper, we find people struggling to cope with pain most cannot imagine, fighting a daily battle just to make it through. Their struggles remind us that trauma is not something we get over, it's something we learn to live with, manage, and eventually rise above, often with the help of others. So, what can we do, as individuals and as a community? We can start by replacing judgment with understanding, by offering support instead of stigma, and by advocating for better resources for mental health and addiction treatment. If someone in your life is trapped in this cycle, the most powerful gift you can offer is not advice, but presence, a willingness to listen, to help them find professional care, and to remind them that healing is possible, even if the road is hard. The intersection of PTSD, addiction, and physical decline is a daunting frontier for science and society alike. But as research advances and awareness grows, we inch closer to solutions that don't just treat symptoms, but restore dignity, health, and hope. The journey will be long for many, but every step toward compassion and understanding breaks another link in the chain. What if, the next time you encounter someone struggling in this cycle, you saw not weakness, but extraordinary resilience? And what if, together, we could help rewrite their story from one of brokenness to one of survival and, ultimately, renewal?